here are my thoughts. So it has to do with nihilism. And the basic premise would go a bit like this. Many people, and let me preface this also by saying that Kellan DL Head.
That's right.
Is our guest today, as he was last time, but now in full visual form, manifest in the flesh. And
I'm not just a vat and a brain.
You are not a vat in a brain, or a ghostly vapor that rises off of the sea, but a real human being.
Yeah.
A human being. And Kellan is getting his doctorate at present at the University of Syracuse in philosophy, which makes him a...
I think it's Syracuse University.
I always get it wrong.
Yeah.
So it's not the University of Syracuse, Syracuse University. Yeah. The University of Syracuse is a whole other entity that like you get. The rivalry is strong.
It's real bad.
Yeah.
Some crosstown shootouts there. Yeah.
Understandable. So Syracuse University, but Kellan is of course a brilliant mind, and so he's here to tell me all the things that I get wrong about these ideas and to set me straight, among other things. But that being said, and for us justifying our existence is enough and our presence is enough, here's the thought. Okay, so people get stuck in a certain nihilistic trajectory, right? They say, oh, nothing means anything. There's no truth. There is no value. Like, there's this sort of like epiphany realization of like, wow, like everything is culturally conditioned. Everything is a construct. Everything is my mind generating the very kind of means of me being able.
Well, let's just be clear. That is at present. That's the most frequent introduction to nihilism. Not necessarily the only.
Sure.
Type.
No, but you have to let me monologue first, and
okay.
then okay.
Yes.
So I'm gonna outline sort of one typical descent into nihilism, and I mean, and let me get this out of the way too. It's phrased as a descent into nihilism, and that I think needs to be sort of justified in its own way, because I think you could look at nihilism and be like, well, if it's intellectually justified, and if it's it seems to be borne out by the evidence, and et cetera, then like, and we've talked about this in terms of skepticism. Like there's this anathema, like skepticism is like persona non grata in the philosophical university sphere, and like you have to be like, oh well, but we're not skeptics here, and like there's just like this unquestioned, like this is a bad thing, and I think that can be problematic. So I'm not necessarily going into this in this like unquestioned like nihilism is bad and we all need to get away from it. Right. In fact, this whole podcast, or at least anyway this monologue such as it is, I would actually argue the opposite, that nihilism is important. It is a valuable insight into the nature of things, and I think that what I'm trying to communicate ultimately, and where I'm going with this, is that nihilism is something to go through and not to turn back from. And I'll clarify a little bit what I mean by that in a minute. But so here's my thought. So anyway, I say all that because like I'm on Facebook now. I'm trying to like be a digital human being in the 21st century, millennial hipster. And there are nihilism groups on Facebook that have like people post about nihilism. It's
the memes.
Like the memes, and people are engaged with this. It's like this is something that people are understanding and aware of.
I'm an atheist. Like and subscribe.
And I'm a nihilist, or like I'm grappling with nothing means anything, and like everything that I thought to be true about like inherent value in the world is actually false. That sort of thing. And I forget why I bring that up, but I guess I'm just acknowledging the fact that there are a group of people out there that sort of identify with this label, and I understand it, and I'm not trying to denigrate it, and I'm not trying to sort of talk down to it and say like, oh, here's this terrible thing that needs to be overcome. Though I do believe it needs to be overcome, but it's not.
Yeah.
Like it's like puberty. It's not like oh, here's this awful thing that we wish never happened. And be some kind of like ascetic monk, like
Right.
self-flagellating myself due to the perils of the flesh and all that. Puberty is a necessary and important stage, however much it sucks that you have to progress through if you're going to
I got pomples on my face.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I have to say about that. So in this sort of like kind of popular nihilism that I think a lot of people experience, and I know that I sort of experience this. I guess I want to set this up by saying that I want to propose two different ideas of nihilism, two different, maybe even stages, and maybe even degrees of severity. By the way, I don't advocate smoking. Two different stages of nihilism. First stage is this idea of like,
wait, two different stages or two different variants?
So I want to say
Types.
What I want to argue is that there are sort of two categories of nihilism, and I do believe that they're experiential stages, in the sense that they follow one upon the other. Not necessarily, but let me just throw this idea out there. Okay. So let's say there's nihilism A and nihilism B. Nihilism A, which is sort of the more kind of superficial level nihilism, is to basically operate on all of the presuppositions and presumptions of your inherited metaphysical paradigm and to nullify it. To basically say like, there is no ultimate truth. There is no, grand narrative that explains everything, and this is the reality of things, and that you need to.
A little what bar here I could put a.
That would be nice.
A cube in there.
You can set that. Well, you're good.
Go on. Yeah.
And so what this basically does is like you grow up in a situation, presumably where there are ideas about ultimate truth and knowledge and reality, and what this nihilistic turn kind of reveals to you is that all these ideas are there, but like they're wrong, or that they're false, that like that there is no truth, that there is no ultimate reality, that like everything is flux, everything is change, and like you're gonna die and you don't have an immortal soul and all this stuff, and like and that realization in the face of these concepts is like really paralyzing and awful and like and horrible. And so there's a lot more I could say about that, but I don't want to spend too much time there because I think a lot of people understand that idea of nihilism.
Is the second one more of a fertile creative ground?
Well, so I'll get there.
Yeah.
But just to kind of top that off, I would say that like this nihilism A is sort of like it's that kind of idea that there is no value, there is no meaning, and that is just real. That's just the reality that you've got to deal with. Okay.
Could I talk about A for a little bit, or should I wait until we're done?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll get to it. So, here's what I want to propose. Then there's this other nihilism, which I actually think is more revealing and profound and interesting, and this is the nihilism that Nietzsche talks about. I mean, he talks about the other form of nihilism too, and I could grab my book where one of the greatest sort of presentations of nihilism A is the madman who goes out with his lantern looking for God, and he's like, I seek God, where is God? Like, and everyone laughs at him, and he's like, and then he just kind of launches into them being like, what have we done that we've unchained this earth from its sun? Is there no up or down? Are we always just constantly flinging from side to side in an infinite space? And that is sort of this like totally unmoored nihilism A. But Nietzsche was an incredible thinker and a very deep thinker, and he was dealing with these ideas at levels that I think is safe to say your average sort of high school nihilist is not. And so he was getting at levels where, which gets into what we're just calling for the sake of argument, nihilism B, which is if you really go down this avenue and you pursue these ideas, as he did, nihilism ultimately leads to the realization, as he said, that truth itself, the very idea of truth, is a religious concept. And the way that he put that is that believing in this idea of truth as being in any way kind of inherently valuable. It's like, why do we want the truth? I mean, like, we kind of just unquestionably accept this idea that, like, oh, we want to pursue the truth, and no matter where it goes, and, we'll heroically, go in defense of the truth, to explore the truth, no matter what it leads us to. But what he was saying was that even this idea of truth is another form of religious thinking. He called it the shadow of God, and that these shadows, even after the fall or the decline of religion, still haunt the Western mind of, like, we're still thinking in terms of, like, there's a truth. And as he would say, like, as long as people still are, committed to these ideas of, like, truth, they're really not really grappling with nihilism and the death of God, because they still have this God concept, which is the truth.
Yeah.
And so I had wanted to find a bunch of different instances, different quotes here, but I didn't have time. So there's just one at the beginning of Beyond Good and Evil. I mean, he sets this up right away, and he's already beginning to get at this stuff, I realize, in Birth of Tragedy. And he says...
Birth of Tragedy was his first book, right?
His first, like, real...
Actual,
and, he would distance himself a bit from that later on, but...
It was almost literary criticism more than...
Yeah, there were a lot of things going on there. But he says this right in the beginning of Beyond Good and Evil. Well, maybe I'll just start... This is literally the beginning of Beyond Good and Evil. The will to truth, which will still tempt us to many a venture, that famous truthfulness of which all philosophers so far have spoken with respect. What questions has this will to truth not laid before us? What strange, wicked, questionable questions? That is a long story even now, and yet it seems as if it had scarcely begun. It is any wonder that we should finally become suspicious, lose patience, and turn away impatiently? That we should finally learn from the Sphinx to ask the questions, too? Who is it really that puts questions to us here? What in us really wants truth? And he says, suppose we want truth, why not rather untruth and uncertainty, even ignorance? So he's posing the question, like, what is it about, this idea of truth? I mean, philosophy, the love of wisdom, you could even stretch that to say the love of truth, really. Because wisdom is the recognition of truth to some degree. And so...
Can't be wise about something.
Yeah.
You don't have knowledge.
Right.
You can't
so,
have knowledge of something.
And he's getting at the root of it, saying, like, what does it really mean then to be a philosopher? What is it about the philosopher's quest to know the truth? And he's asking the question, why do we want to know this thing called the truth? He says a little bit later, the falseness of a judgment is for us, and he's talking about himself now and this new kind of vision of philosophy that he's presenting, is for us not necessarily an objection to a judgment, its falseness. In this respect, our new language may sound strangest. The question is to what extent it is life-promoting, life-preserving, species-preserving, perhaps even species-cultivating. And we are fundamentally inclined to claim that the falsest judgments, which include the synthetic judgments a priori, dig at Kant, are the most indispensable for us. That without accepting the fictions of logic, without measuring reality against the purely invented world of the unconditional and self-identical, without a constant falsification of the world by means of numbers, man could not live. Renouncing false judgments would mean renouncing life in a denial of life. And he says a philosophy that risks this is already going beyond good and evil. And so he's laying out this premise that, like, why seek truth? Is it possible that the pursuit of untruth might actually be more valuable from a standpoint of like what is life affirming and yeah. And in some ways, it's sort of juxtaposing this ancient idea of like, you know, what is the good life, right? Is the good life, if that is the ideal of philosophy, maybe that's a different thing than the true life. You know, you might be pursuing truth, but you might find yourself racked by questions and in total agony in search in the pursuit of truth. Actually, I hadn't planned this, but like the book that I have presented on that little stand there is Faust in his study, where he is.
I feel like back in the when I was an altar boy,
right?
You had to go and read for the priest, but you had to make sure that your fingers weren't covering up.
Is that part of the?
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think that's also why one of the reasons I've always really loved and identified with Faust is this question of like Faust is a character who's pursuing truth so adamantly but ultimately to his ruin. He's a tragic figure in the beginning because his pursuit of truth has actually left him miserable.
Certainly a bit of a tragic figure at the end too.
Well, that's true too. And, yeah. But so the question then is if not truth, then what?
Yeah.
And I think that's the question that nihilism poses. And that's nihilism B. That's not just saying there is a truth and the truth is, you know, there is no God, there is no purpose, blah, blah, blah. Because that's still affirming that there's a truth. You're like,
right.
And you just have to commit to it and accept it, however hard and agonizing and sorrowful and tragic as it might be. You might just have to heroically say, but it's the truth, and I embrace it, and I'll, you know, die on that truth. But that's different from what nihilism B and what Nietzsche is getting us to try to explore is saying, which is that even the question of truth is up for debate and question and is and so, you know, he goes on to kind of develop these ideas and explore like, well, what might be the values of untruth, how might it be life affirming, whereas the pursuit of truth might be deleterious to life and all that. So here's my contribution to this or thought. So I'm going to propose that nihilism, fully conceived, fully experienced,
a mature B
nihilism, actually presents, if not demands, an exit out of nihilism into something else. And let me explain that. So, and I'll end my monologue soon.
I'm liking it though.
Okay, good. So what I would say is this: is that if you follow the rabbit hole of nihilism to this point, and you're like, wow, Nietzsche's right. He's got a good point here. Like, you know, I'm still worshiping this transcendent idea of truth, which is in some ways another form of God. So long as I adhere to this notion that there is this truth that I need to, you know, and here's where Nietzsche has this other idea about ascetic ideals, which he touches on at great length in Genealogy of Morals and I think Beyond Good and Evil. Actually, mainly in Beyond Good and Evil. And what he talks about is, yeah, like people will suffer. They will subject themselves to incredible torments and agonies for the sake of some transcendent ideal. The ascetic ideal, this thing that like is a disciplining notion that like they will hitch their wagon to this star no matter what, and it's so long as it remains meaningful to them, they'll do anything for it. And obviously, I mean, the history of religion shows this to be very much the case, and a lot of blood has been spilt because of it. And so he asks, you know, what is the meaning? What's the value of ascetic ideals? Why do we do this? And he ultimately concludes, I think in the Gay Science, I think it's the Gay Science, where he's like saying, we philosophers do this. Philosophers, even, you know, atheistic, nihilistic philosophers, nihilistic A philosophers, do this so long as we, you know, suffer for the sake of truth. And again, so just to bring this all back, so you're in this position where you're realizing, well, so what am I going to do about this? Now, let's say you're someone who, and I don't think this is very uncommon. I think I was in this position. And I'm also, I should say that this is coming from my own experience too. This isn't just purely abstract. This is kind of how I got back to a spiritual sensibility from nihilism.
Right.
So this is actually, I think that's important to say, because this isn't just like a kind of abstract prescription. This is the path that I kind of took to explore spirituality again, but from a new angle. So you're there and you're saying, okay, there is no necessarily inherent value to this idea of truth and my ascetic subjugation to it. Then why am I beating myself up and suffering so much for the sake of this ideal, right? If it was so much nicer to believe in a God and a meaning and, you know, some notion of, you know, there are values and things aren't as awful as they seem, you know, like, then why not do that?
Yeah.
Right? So, like, because here's the other thing that I also didn't mention about this is that one of the first things that I think happens to a lot of people when they experience a crisis of faith or a loss of meaning, certainly what I did was there's this turn to aestheticism and to hedonism, right? And how I justified that was basically by saying, okay, so I've lived my life so far according to these principles and these ideals and this Bible, this text, whatever, these ascetic ideals, right? And I've suffered for them. And then when you realize that all that's hogwash, you say, well, why did I do this? Why did I suffer? Why did I not enjoy myself? And then you start to look back on all the instances where you sacrificed your pleasure for the sake of your ascetic ideals, and you self-flagellate anew, but instead now out of regret for all those opportunities you didn't take. So one of the first realizations of the nihilist, I think, before the kind of gravity of nihilism sets in, is I'm free. All this weight, this burden, the commandments, the law, the expectation, the ideal has been lifted. There is no ideal. There is no truth. There is no God watching me. There is no morality. I can do what I want to do, and that can be very liberating. And so that can lead into this sort of aesthetic hedonism. And so here's another thing that I want to say. And again, I'm sorry that
this is a lengthy monologue.
It is.
Yeah.
But here I'm also drawing a bit on or I'm inspired by Kierkegaard, who presents his philosophy as sort of a series of stages. He talks about the stages of life, the aesthetics stage, the ethical stage, and then the religious stage. And so I'm sort of trying to present an analog to that, but maybe in a different way that might resonate with more people today. So what I'm going to argue is this, is that with the onset of nihilism, supposing that there's a sort of period of naivete, that's number one, right? That you grow up in usually because you inherit your family's, traditional conceptions about things and morality and all that. And then you come to this questioning phase and the critical phase, hopefully. Many people don't, but like you do.
Yeah.
And that's sort of this period of doubt and disillusionment. And then there's the nihilism stage. So you go from naivete to the nihilism if you follow that doubt and that critique to its kind of depth.
A.
Yeah, so A. And then A, I think, if you're really pursuing these things, will get you to nihilism B, which is then you're in the depth of it and you're saying, wow, this whole idea even of truth is a construct, is a transcendent ascetic ideal that I want to liberate myself from. And then the turn. The turn, though, is that when you are in this nihilistic aesthetic hedonism and you're privileging basically everything that you want that will make you feel good, because that is your only basis for any judgment or decision, is like, what feels good?
Well, I mean, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
Because what other basis do you have to make decisions on? I mean, now this could be, we could talk about this.
Yeah.
But so then you say, all right, well, if there's no truth that I need to adhere myself to, and if I felt, some value and some meaning and some good feelings from my spiritual sensibility, maybe that untruth is actually life-affirming. Maybe this fiction of my spirituality is actually more important and more good for my yes saying to life and wanting to go on and wanting to live another day and having a sense of a purpose in the future and all that stuff. Maybe this illusion of meaning to life is more important and better than some kind of absurd ascetic commitment to the negative and very dour realizations of nihilism. And that idea comes out of nihilism.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in a nihilistic stance. You're not saying, I want to go back. I don't like this nihilism thing. I want to go back and, this is too scary for me. What you're really saying is, I'm following this thing to its conclusion. I'm taking this stance within nihilism, and I'm following it to the logical conclusion that if what I want is a fulfillment in a sense of pleasure and well-being, a eudaimonia, and if that needs to come from engagement with spiritual concepts, then from a nihilistic standpoint, you are entirely justified to make that decision. And that, I think, is important, because I think if you can acknowledge that, then that opens up a whole new thing immediately, because most nihilists will be like, oh, anyone who wants to do the spirituality thing is like, that's a total cop-out, they're not acknowledging the truth, But then it's like, they've given themselves away. If they're talking about the truth, they've still got their own shadows of God that they're worshiping,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, ironically, you can be less religious, less enamored of transcendent ideals by engaging with spiritual concepts than by being the dogmatic atheist and, banging your head on the wall saying, there is no truth, there is no truth, there is no truth. So that's the basic concept that I want to get across, because I think that then creates a path towards a spiritual sensibility that arises beyond nihilism, not just away from or back from or in contradistinction to or something like that, but like you go through nihilism and you reassert the spiritual. Now, that's not where it ends. You don't just keep doing that and saying, oh, well, all the spiritual stuff is just because, I have to, otherwise everything is meaningless and I don't want to be there. But that is where it starts. And in another podcast, I can talk about, I think, like...
I'm getting really drunk right now.
Good,
man.
good. So that's the monologue, for whatever it's worth. And so
Indeed, a monologue, yeah.
I open up the floor to your thoughts on this idea,
man.
and
right. Well, viewers of the Brendan Show are satiated now, for sure.
There are no viewers of the Brendan Show. This
So all right. So first, I guess if I can keep track of a few things that I want to say. The first I want to say is this nihilism seems to, in a way, the nihilism at least that you have talked about and presented, seems to be predicated on this idea that what happens first is the assumption of sort of, I'm going to use the word objective truths.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when Nietzsche was writing, I think that was far more common than it is today. Because nowadays...
What was more common?
This idea that the default understanding of the world for most people was a more objective, truth-oriented
that
kind
there
of
is
outline.
an objective reality.
Today, in part because of nihilist thinkers' influence in culture, in Western culture, a lot of people are not brought up in the world with the same set of assumptions.
Sure.
Okay. So in contemporary ethics, there's it's called error theory, and what error theory is saying that so objective truth or moral truths are kind of positing certain objective truths, and error theorists say everybody feels this, but there are no moral truths, and so everyone who's affirming these types of things are not even saying anything that's true. But there's a lot of people that don't buy the error theory for the reason.
So just to clarify, so I remember, very briefly when I started college, I was a philosophy major, and then I realized that wasn't quite the right route for me at the time, but I remember exploring this idea about moral realism. And so
moral realism, moral objectivism.
So what do you call it?
Error theory.
Error theory. Is that basically another phrase for moral irrealism? It's like
Well, no,
people
no,
who are
no.
moral realists are wrong.
No,
They're
no,
making
because one of the things that distinguishes error theory from other sorts of non-moral realism is that error theorists say that, like, moral truths are presented or are supposed to have certain contents such that the moral truths are real and they are objective. And the error theorist says, but there are no moral truths, like universal moral truths. Those don't exist. And so every time that we talk about moral things, we're making a grave mistake in that regard. Now, so going back to what I was saying, I don't buy error theory very much. I'll get to that in a little bit. But I think that nowadays it might be a little bit more common for people to kind of have as a fundamental assumption relativism in an umbrella sense of the term, relativism. So it would be one thing if let's say everybody has a similar kind of maybe fundamentalist sort of Christian view of the world or something, right, where there's the one true way, and whatever. But then they come to then they embark on the nihilist path, as the way you described. But nowadays I don't think that happens as much or even very often anymore, because a lot of times people are kind of, one of the base assumptions that they have about the world is just that everything's kind of just relative.
Well, can I ask you a question though? I don't want to interrupt if you want to finish your thought.
Yeah. No. Yeah. What?
Well, so my question though is, do you think? Because I agree with you. I mean, I think that more and more, like one of the ways that I view my experience is very atypical, and I think that in some ways that
you experienced the fall, and a lot of people don't.
Yes, I think that's true, because I grew up in this evangelical context that was such a kind of vestige of a former world that like the jarring juxtaposition of like coming from that into the modern world was, I think I felt that in a more intense way than a lot of people do. But I would argue, and I do argue, and I will argue, that just because people these days kind of swim in relativism, and that's kind of what they kind of take as the norm and the default position, I would still argue that doesn't mean that they are at home in that philosophical world.
Sure. And I mean, I want to get to this this kind of just innate attractiveness towards objectivity when it comes to truths and things. That's right. Okay, so for example, right, freshmen who take Intro to Ethics or something, right, of anything, because I TA'd for that last semester, of anything that me as a TA, my responsibilities of orienting them in towards the philosophical mindset in the right way and getting them all on the same page, by far the most common task that I'm faced with is getting everyone out of this very immediate way of looking at things, especially when it comes to like moral truths and ethical truths, where it's just like, listen, man, that's just like, Big Lebowski. That's like just your opinion, man. Because that's like literally everyone walks in the door with like that's the only way to look at things. And there's a lively debate between moral realists and moral irrealists, in contemporary philosophy. And in order to have them even engage or understand with texts that moral realists have written, you really need to kind of rid them of
Can I ask you a question?
those predilections.
I know you're setting up a point, but I'm so interested in this because like, so then all right, because I was in the opposite position, right? I studied religion
Yeah.
in my undergrad, and by studying religion, I mean it was religious anthropology. It was,
Right.
Vermont has a good program for, like, if you are an anthropologist curious in, like, a Durkheimian or sociological sense of, like, the human category of religion and, like, exploring
William
that phenomenon.
James, whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, even William James is too mystical for them. They're empiricists, really. And anyway, and so that was the camp that I was sort of engaged in at the time that I was still trying to hold on to some, religious beliefs.
Yeah.
And so here I am, freshman year, in an interpretation of religion class, and, like, I'm arguing. No, I'm all set. I'm arguing about, like,
Bring that over here, then.
This idea. I'm arguing these ideas that would present what I believe to be just one view of the world. I'm sort of in this position of, like, but this is true, and I need to be able to defend that this is the truth. And I was obviously very much an outsider in that context. But what you're saying is that what really is the default is that it's, at least in these contexts, is that people come into these classes and they're so immersed in, well, that's your worldview, that's your perspective, that's, it's all this relativistic stuff, that you actually, as the philosophy teacher of some kind,
need to reel them back.
Quite literally, pardon the pun, but you need to reel them, back into this sense of, like, there's this real thing, and it's not just
at least entertain it in a way that you don't give it short shrift.
Now, and we can return to this in a second, but what I'm curious about, what I'm intrigued by, is that even though that may be the norm, or maybe, I love the expression in like academic works where it's like, despite this, or perhaps because of it. I love that. It's like, anyway, but it actually, it's true here. It's despite the that being the case, or maybe especially because of it, I think that there are people who, there are many people out there who feel very confused about the world and feel lost and feel like they need some moorings and some ideas that are concrete and blah, blah, blah. It's like there is this innate desire to want to be objectivist, to be universalizing.
Listen, that's like, I mean, I think at the end of the day, and again, this is pipe dreams for me, but I'd love to spend years really honing a certain philosophy about this, but I think at the root of a lot of maybe we might find what we might call contention, or root of misunderstanding, is just the identification of inconsistency. That being like, so what you're kind of alluding to, I would say, is maybe there's a smell, this faint scent of inconsistency when it comes to, well, we can't, I hate this phrase, can't have the cake and eat it too. The reason I've always hated that phrase is because to have cake means to eat it. Okay? It's always driven me fucking nuts. But, this idea you can't have your cake and eat it too, because you can't, your core convictions cannot be an objectivist conviction, but still reject objectivism or realism when it comes to a lot of things,
No, what do you mean by that?
You can't, at the same time where you are this kind of like truth seeker, this maybe even like nihilist B type truth seeker, whatever, we're still, or the problems with nihilist A, there's
I wouldn't call nihilist B a truth seeker anymore. The nihilist B is given up or has abandoned the idea that one should be a truth seeker or needs to be.
I guess what I'm saying is nihilist B is identified it. Yeah. That's what I mean. But you can't be this kind of, you can't have these firm convictions that there is such thing as truth in these realms, while at the same time assuming the default of pure and unadulterated relativism.
Okay, so you're saying there's this idea of like, if you're going to be a relativist, actually, when I think about the nihilism thing, it's funny because what I would say that the problem with nihilist A is that it's bad faith nihilism. You know, in the in the larger sense of like, you know, you can't so but in the same way in relativism, like it's bad faith relativism to be like, this is true for me, because if you're saying this is true for me, you have some concept of what is true.
Right, and I mean, there's issues of you know like reflexive, if you're like, you know, reflexive relativist, like right.
Well, but it's quite a leap to be like, it's one thing to be like, I like spaghetti and you don't, so spaghetti is good for me and it's not for you. Like, people can handle that. But if they're like, you know, well, you know, I believe in the laws of gravity and you don't, and so, you know, that's just different viewpoints for us.
Right.
Then, like, people might start to smell that thing maybe that you're talking about. I don't know if I'm interpreting.
Well, I think here's a good example. There's a lot of you know, there's some intellectual support for this idea that you know, let's say feminism in the sense of, you know, equality of the sexes, at least, you know, that itself is a kind of a creation or an invention of the Western liberal tradition. So, you know, obviously one of the things that most people would find to hold against a lot of, maybe, you know, let's just, for example, certain Middle Eastern cultures that don't acknowledge the equality of the sexes. One of the complaints, the arguments against that is that, like, well, no, like, equality of the sexes is a fundamental truth that needs to be sought, and that culture doesn't hold that, right? But if we come to find out that equality of the sexes is simply just a truth that we hold to be true simply in virtue of our culture and nothing else, how are we going to
this is
do anything about that?
Let's steer clear from that one for now, because that's a huge, it's obviously related.
I'm just using it to illustrate like that. That itself is just like, there's a lot of roadblocks.
I know. I mean,
first,
for me, it all hinges on this issue of, like, you can say it's simpler of just like, the relativist says truth is relative. And if that is true, then what does that mean? You can't make a general statement. You know what I mean? So, like, there are inherent kind of fundamental, you know, I don't even know, almost like meta questions that the very relativization of truth raises. And that would be its own circuit. But I feel like I've tangentialized you a number of times from making your...
that's okay.
Okay.
I don't remember what the thing I was making was, but I don't know. What was I? There was I was trying to come back to error theory at some point. I don't find error theory attractive, mostly because error theory kind of has as one of its you know, premises there that the normative pull, or, you know, something like that, of ethics in general is an objective pull, right? It's like that's at the core of it. That's what we all feel. That's like there. And to be an error theorist, we have to identify that, and then we have to say there are no moral truths, so everyone's making a mistake in that regard. Everyone's in error. But I don't really think that, you know, you can do conceptual analysis, like whatever. But I don't think that that's the most accurate way to portray what moral truths are. I've never felt the objective pull or the realist pull.
So hold that thought, because I'm low on scotch. You're low on scotch. I'd like to pee. You're gonna pee. We'll take a quick break and give me some perspective on my thing that I threw out there.
Right. So,
like, is there a philosophical bone in your body that says, no, you can't do that? You can't do that. Sorry, you need to, like, this, like, engaging with the spiritual paradigm is a cop out or something like that. I don't know. I mean, like because here's what I think is attractive, and what I'm trying to put forth is that I think that a lot of people, philosophers included, and most intellectual sorts, would look at an engagement with spiritual topics as being a sort of, like, it's like you're at a party, right? And someone's like, "Oh, and I just like got my tarot card reading," and it's like, "Oh, okay."
So let me clarify, because I've been grimacing with this spiritual word.
Sure.
Do you mean to say that something that might kind of spiritual carries with it this kind of assumption that it's been proven to be effective?
What do you mean by proven to be effective?
So, okay, so you have the nihilism B, and at some point I want to get to this idea that there's a nihilism C.
Ooh. Okay.
And the nihilism C is this understanding that us as humans seek objectivity. Actually, it doesn't really matter if our seeking it is a result of some sort of constructed thing or not, or if it's, it might be even biologically innate for some bizarre reason, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But nihilism sees this idea that acknowledging that we get to play with it now. And we get to
play with objectivity.
We get to play with the fact that we now know that we do better.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. That's so what you're all right. Just on those terms, and you might qualify it differently. Yeah. But on those terms, definition wise, that's what I'm talking about. With is this not nihilism B? It's the next stage. That's the engagement.
Nihilism
with
B.
spiritual
but I
ideas.
I think it's still. I mean, it's in any regard still nihilism.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's also my whole point, is that it is possible to be spiritual and nihilistic at the same time.
Right, okay.
And just as in the same way, and I might, but the idea of things might not be this way deep down, it's the same way. It
doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even though at a fundamental level this might not be a table, it's like fundamentally, like, nihilism might be true, but at that level, but once you're at a different level, like, then you can start dealing with different
like
things.
those like Pop Foucault, right? Freshman year in college, there's the
like Foucault in 30 seconds sort of a thing.
Right, or there's the scarf people who have read Foucault.
The scarf people.
And then they come and they tell you, "Oh, you like that? Well, you only like that because you're conditioned to like that, so you shouldn't like it anymore."
Yes.
I'm like, at first everyone's like, "Oh, fuck."
Right.
And then
that's nihilism A.
And then the second time around, though, you're like, "Fuck you, I still like it."
Yeah.
No, I still like it. You can give whatever kind of
yes.
archaeology of knowledge,
right.
fucking, excuse for the reason.
Well, because eventually you can turn it right back around and you can say, well, you know what? Because here's the thing. This is important. Is that, okay, there's a whole metaphysical concept, a worldview, that says this thing. And then it's like people to buy into it. And then there's this, like, person on the side who's able to get outside of it. And they're like, oh, that thing, that's just because of this, and blah, 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 blah. And then from within that metaphysical worldview system, when someone says that, then it's discounted. You're like, oh shit, they're right. It's like being like,
there's also a problem with just like kind of epistemic circularity there.
Well, huge problem, but we'll leave that for a second. But that's the whole. But that's the whole issue, is that it's all circular, and so because someone says like, oh shit, they're right, man. Like I only do like this because I've been conditioned to blah 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 blah. Here's the problem. This is the problem, is that when then the person says, therefore it is invalid. No, that's the problem.
This is, and I've said this before. There's this. I hate how it's almost, it sounds like it's trite, but it's not. The question of the matrix is not a trite question. In philosophy, it is not at all. Vat in a brain, brain in a vat.
Let's call the whole thing off.
Yeah, right. But and this is my kind of. And I'm gonna admit, I still don't think that I understand the seriousness of radical skepticism really yet. Either I do so much and I'm so smart and I get it so much.
I think this is one of those things. I think this is one of those things where it's like, I've never done DMT. Well, no, this is a
okay. All right. Yeah. So, you know, one of the big. And you alluded to this in the beginning. You know, obviously in academic epistemology at this point, everyone's like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We got to be on the same team against skepticism, right? You know,
right.
You know, it's like, listen, I don't think knowledge comes cheap. You know, et cetera, whatever, right? So, one of the big kind of just like base intuitive things is like, listen, man, if you have to pick like something that just like gives your life meaning, like it's probably going to include like the people that you love, you know, like everybody has to get on board with that, right? And they're like, how can you possibly entertain the idea that the people that you love don't exist, right? And they're like, so you can't even really begin to accept this kind of radical skepticism. What I've always thought is like, there's something that's missing, like that just like basic kind of line argument, right? And the way that I put it is like, your love for people, or something like, you know, the relationship that you have with persons and your appreciation, the value that you find, shouldn't be predicated on some ontological assumption. Like, you don't have to. You don't have to, like, certain...
I love you whether you're real or not, damn it.
No, I mean, but, like, there's something true about that.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, like certain existence conditions don't have to be met for me to, like, love things.
I could see a great film where that's the ending. They find out, they're like, this is like whatever.
Oh,
whether, you know,
yeah,
and then it's like,
and at the end they hold hands.
Yeah.
They
it's
still
like, I
hold
love
hands.
you know.
They still, yeah.
I mean, actually, I didn't.
Have you seen Her?
I was just gonna say.
That was a disturbing film, man.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. I want a pair of those pants though. But yeah, I don't. Well, no. So that's, you know, I don't. There was a grander part to this.
Yeah.
There's social construction, and you know, nothing's real stuff.
Well, tell me. You were saying you were grimacing at the...
the spiritual, right.
Spiritual thing.
Okay, so... This is going to be kind of a rough pass here. But, so let's say you've gotten to the point where I'm going to call it nihilism C, right?
Okay, but just for the record, I do think that what you mean by nihilism C is what I'm calling...
Post-nihilism B.
Yeah.
Well, C comes after B.
Okay. Okay, fair. All right.
It's still nihilism. Still nihilism.
Right.
It has to be still nihilism.
Yeah. No, and that's a good point. So whatever comes after, nihilism does have to be at the root of
still
it.
there, man.
Because here's the thing, and I do think this is really important, that like, I don't... Well, this is interesting, okay? Because one of the contentions I do want to make down the road is that this nihilism does become something that is no longer nihilism. So that might be a point at which it is.
We don't want to use the same.
But I do believe there's a difference between, like, you know, there's a difference between talking to someone who's just positive and upbeat about everything all the time because they've never gone through any suffering, and someone who, like, has gone through profound suffering
and has come to
yeah.
Sure.
And I think that's what that's a distinction I'm trying to make here, because, like,
but it's still the same attitude, I think, or maybe you want to say that it's fundamentally a different attitude now.
That's an interesting question. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that what's important, at least in some practical terms, is that when someone is suffering and they talk to that person...
Which one?
So let's say, like, I just lost a family member or whatever, and I talk to someone who presents as very upbeat and everything, but I know that they suffered a lot too in the past.
Yes.
That person... They need to be able to go back into that place to engage with me there, right?
Yeah.
That
capable of it.
That's accessible, right? Yeah. In a way that, like, for the person who never went through that shit, is not.
No.
Right. And so that's what I mean about the nihilism thing too. Is that it's like it doesn't remain, like, that person is not still grieving, but they know what grief is, and that is an important
Right.
thing
No,
in a
no,
way that like
I guess
someone
I'm using nihilism less as a dispositional, status. To be a nihilist, you don't, you have to look like a nihilist. I guess I'm saying nihilism is in terms of just
well,
like
if they quack like a nihilist.
right. No, but like nihilist in terms of core commitments and convictions and beliefs.
Anyway, so you want to talk about nihilism?
So here's the first rough pass at my problem with the spiritual fixation thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so in one case, this is we'll probably develop this in a little bit, but my convictionism.
Yeah.
This idea that this is nihilism. Convictionism, right? Yeah.
Just for the record, because we did this last time, talked about something
Mm-hmm.
that was not referenced earlier. Convictionism is something that you have thought about and developed in some degree. And,
Yes.
But that's for whatever
So,
it's worth.
it's a lot of it is this idea that that certain things maybe if we want to talk about truth, you know that certain things aren't true, but yet you act as if.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
It draws a lot from like pragmatism. This idea that truth is merely the thing that's in some way beneficial to you or something, whatever. Right. So, in one regard, a nihilist could be embarking on a project where they institute a certain cohesive set of beliefs, practices, dispositions, things like that, right? I hesitate to call that spiritual, although I'm not opposed to it, okay? But a lot of times, but for me, one of the important things, I think, and again, I don't know how to defend this or anything yet. Maybe I never will. Maybe this is part of the journey, But there's something that's necessarily personalized about it and subjective.
About what?
About, the solution, right? And for me, like spiritual, it doesn't. It's not that it doesn't allow for it, but a lot of times when the word spiritual is applied to something, it means kind of like a prepackaged, right? And there's a like if you're nihilist B, and you're looking to upgrade to nihilist C, you can go to the store and you can point me to the spiritualist aisle.
Yeah.
And they'll go there and you'll see all these prepackaged spiritualist things, right? And if you buy one of those, you start publishing books about how it's pretend your life is a music festival, things like this. Like whatever.
Wait. This is big. This is really helpful. Okay, so this is in some ways an aside, but I think it's really important because it does get at this question of what is meant by spiritual.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what I'm arguing is nihilism C.
Can I just say something? I think something I'm comfortable to say is that to me something that's spiritual has at least a connotation, if not a certain necessary condition or something, where there's like a shared aspect to it. You buy the spiritualist package in part because it's a bestseller.
And you're buying into something then.
Yeah. And for me, God, this is getting really abstract, but for me, the what you need to do to upgrade from B, like in Pokemon, certain Pokemon, you needed to do certain things in order to evolve them. You needed to trade them or throw stones at them, Moonstone. Whatever.
Logically, sure.
Right. So in order to evolve your Nihilist B into Nihilism C, you can't buy the spiritualist package. You have to develop your own.
So here's what I think. What I'm trying to say is that what I mean by spiritual which I think is an important thing. And I'm not going to try to define it in terms of like.
God, this is good fucking.
Yeah, it's good scotch.
It's so good.
What's it?
Bummer.
Vamos.
Bummer.
El vamos. There's nothing more than
the Gallic Scots.
Yeah, right. There's nothing more Scottish than a French accent.
Actually, I was actually thinking of this today. I think Gaul, like Gaelic, the word Gaelic. I think that came from the Latin Gallica, right?
Gaul, yeah. Caesar conquered
like
Gaul.
That's like right, and like that's like the
Gaelic. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
But I would assume that Caesar conquered Gaul, and they called it Gaul because they heard from the natives that they called it something like Gaelia. You know?
Right. Well,
it's not necessarily a Latin.
There's a part of the Gaelic, Brittany's considered like Gaelic.
Mm-hmm.
That's still Gaelic thing, and parts of northern Spain too. Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
So, I think that one of the important distinctions that using the word spiritual raises for me is that it's not any longer philosophical, which is to say, it's not any longer.
It's Kierkegaard.
Well, it's not any longer discursive or logical in a linear way. That's an important thing. So when I
like that you associate that with philosophy.
I think ideally,
I think like one-to-one overlap almost. Yeah.
Well, I think that talking with you anyway. I mean, who knows what other sorts of philosophers there are out there? But when you talk about philosophy, you talk about clear and distinct ideas. You talk about clarity and
well, that's the analytic tradition.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a desire, if not a need. Almost like de facto by definition in philosophy for something to be kind of worth its weight in salt, it needs to be analyzable, expressible in sort of linear terms as kind of subject verb agreement, and like these things do this, and it's a very sort of like discursive way.
There's at least reason to be sensitive to those things.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily trying to shit on those things.
No.
I'm just saying that I think that if you want to do philosophy, you can't go in there and be like, so I think that my energy is really powerful right now, and so therefore
like when you go to Google Maps and you search for metaphysics, because that's what I do.
Where does it lead you? The Jung Institute?
Yeah, no, it leads you to healing stone shops.
Yeah.
Sure. That's
sure.
Right.
But and so I think that look, things that have strengths have weaknesses that are their strengths.
If not despite.
That is profound. Yes. Right. No, I mean a better way to put it.
Did you learn nothing about what you just said?
Did you? Clearly. No, I think that the value of philosophy is philosophy is a tool. It's a tool that
I've tried to argue that and defend that. Yeah.
Do you believe it?
Oh, I totally believe it.
Okay, so then tell me where you just start to disagree. Philosophy is a tool that can perform certain functions.
Argumentation is the tool.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. And so, but as soon as you're trying to then do something that tool cannot accomplish, that tool is no longer useful or
valuable. No, it's a leap of faith, man. I'm not even going to go there and use that language. I'm just going to say that I think we can agree that there are some things when you're in coitus, having philosophical prowess and syllogisms is not the tool to use in that moment, right? Fedoras are no good in the bedroom.
Yeah. Well, or what are some of those syllogistic terms? Not a fedora is a hat.
Yeah, but the neckbeard fedoras. I am logical, m'lady.
I don't.
Memes.
Is this
some
meme, man?
Yeah.
You have philosophical.
The neckbeard fucking red pill pieces of shit.
I looked up that Pokemon Porygon meme. Could not find it. You're talking about second level obscure memes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But this is really
Your search history. 20 minutes of Porygon.
Dude,
Play-Doh.
I tried it all. Porygon, Platonist, Porygon screaming, Porygon, attacking. I tried it all. Could not find that. I think you made it up. Or made it. I don't know. But here's the, I mean, there is an economy of means, or I don't know what the term is, but like, in life, we use different tools in different contexts, right? Like, if I'm trying to write a poem, I don't tap into my logical, syllogistic self. If I'm trying to engage erotically with someone, I'm not going to tap into that. If I want to, make a point where there's a bunch of other people and I want them all to agree with me so that they're going to disagree with this other person and that we can all come to some conclusion and make a decision about something, I'll use argumentation and I'll use rhetoric.
Well, this is what I was saying before. There's the logical space that goes beyond the subjective bubble.
Yeah,
and that's...
Right.
Once you don't acknowledge that, it's hard for me.
I'm just saying I don't disagree.
No, I'm not saying you. Yeah,
I know. I'm just saying that I want to supplement that.
Yeah.
It's like I'm saying that's a tool and it serves a function. But like sometimes you don't need a
one
hammer.
of the most functional tools that exists.
Sure.
And has ever.
And maybe crudely functional.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah. Well, now we're getting into the teleological angst.
Well, maybe a hierarchy of tools, but what I'm saying though is that like sometimes you don't need a hammer, you need a screwdriver. It's just as simple as that. And I'm saying that sometimes because here's the thing.
Well, no, but let me this is what I was just trying to allude to though.
Okay.
Looking at a tool and it's saying that I need something that isn't this. Mm-hmm. Presupposes that you've identified a certain need or a certain a type of fulfillment that needs to occur or needs to obtain, and once we start putting our fingers on these certain purposes, I think things get really messy.
What do you mean?
Well, basically, correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that, bringing it back, you're saying that a lot of times we have needs and there are purposes that we seek to fulfill that the tool of logic or the tool of argumentation is unfit for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're saying that gets messy when
I'm just saying that I don't know what to do about the grand sense of teleology. I don't know what to do about that.
Well, you're bringing in teleology. I'm just saying, like, you're jumping the gun.
Okay.
All right. I'm not. I'm just saying that if you can acknowledge that there are certain instances in life, no, I'm okay, where that tool of discursive logic might not be ideal.
Yeah.
You've opened up a realm in which there are other means to fulfill certain ends. And what I'm saying is basically this.
Oh, are you maybe suggesting down the road, are you maybe suggesting that the usefulness of argumentation and logic kind of smuggles in this assumption of the need for objective truth?
Spell that.
Well, so this going back to this, path of nihilism into, into Eden. There's this. We still have to deal with this. We have to contend with this idea that maybe us as cognizant beings have this fetish for objective truth or something. And maybe the usefulness of logic only exists. The usefulness, logic is only useful when we acknowledge that we ultimately seek some sort of objectivity. Logic can give us the objectivity.
Sure. Well, no, I mean, what I'm saying is just that what I'm saying is that I think that tool runs out of its usefulness Now, I would say fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this as someone who tried to use that tool for a long time to just... I had a hammer, right? And I was trying to build a house to live in because we all have to live, right? And I was using that tool to try to build a house. But pretty soon you realize, hey, you can't build a house with just a hammer. But I think a lot of people do. And then when they do, they become very disillusioned and very confused and very upset.
Living
but they
in a
think like,
shitty house.
but this is all I've got and this is all there is my hammer and I've just got to hammer my way out of this.
Well, I mean,
it's hammer time.
Just at first pass here, can I just say that they just have a shitty hammer?
No. I don't think so because... Well, okay, you could say that, and you're welcome to. And I think you're right, maybe for a lot of... Yeah, no. But I don't think that that's the case. I mean, I'll put it this way. I think you, maybe not, but I think you respect my basic philosophical prowess.
No!
And so, if you would make that claim, you'd have to say, oh, well, Brendan, you're just not good at philosophy. Like, if you were good at philosophy, you would never have had these hang-ups, and therefore, blah, blah, blah. And you're welcome to make that claim. It is very, very possible that I'm just shitty at philosophy and shitty at kind of discursive rational thinking.
Well, I'm not the judge of that.
But I'm just saying that I don't think that that's the case, and I think that there's enough empirical evidence to suggest that there are enough people out there who have tried to kind of get by on, this sort of life raft of just rational thought, and it doesn't work, and eventually they have to try something else.
Well, I think that the extension of those people, the set of those people that you're talking about, the vast majority of them are just bad at that anyways. It might be the case that seeing that everyone who thinks that they can make themselves feel better with logic is just bad at argumentation, that might be able to solve the question.
But let me ask you this quite honestly.
Yeah. No, but I'm just... Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but seriously, though, like, when you think of ideal human beings that you've known in the world...
yeah, that's
are they philosophers?
Hard question.
Are they students of philosophy?
Probably
like,
not.
You can be good at philosophy. Wait, this is really important. You can be good at philosophy. You can be so good that you can get into, like, programs at places.
Yeah,
and,
like, we both know.
I know. I'm just saying that, like, you can show prowess in the philosophical world and be completely inept as a human being.
Right.
And, like, what does that mean for that tool, right? Because now I'm not, because you could, I'm going to give you a retort here, which is you could say the same thing about spirituality, is that people who want to use these spiritual tools, like, they're completely inept, and I'll grant you that. So that's not necessarily a knock either way. I'm just saying that, like, if you're trying to make the argument that, like, oh, all you really need is the right tools and you'll be fine, it's like, that's not true. There's something else going on, and I think that...
Well, we've had this conversation, not recently actually, but in the past a lot. I make the mistake a lot, and I don't think it's a mistake, but that itself might be a mistake. But a lot of times the things that I think are the profound truths, I say that, like, well, Wittgenstein argues that, because anything that he says is right. But I think that is one of the questions that Wittgenstein was always trying to at least make sense of, in the sense that does analytic philosophy, is the way that Wittgenstein understood analytic philosophy, which is totally different than what the institutionalized garbage is now. Does Wittgenstein, Wittgenstein was asking, will you be able to attain this status of, and again, this is where the problems of, like, the status of living out your human function, like, are you the most virtuous person because you're the best example of what a human being is, or something, whatever, but, like, like, this general, like, you have done the thing, you've graduated, I think Wittgenstein was wondering whether or not the tools that analytic philosophy, as he knew it, presented, are those adequate tools? Are they right? What's in front of us? Is there a possibility that these things can liberate us to the graduate position? You know.
What are these things?
So, just the tools of analytic philosophy, and I think that he was really trying to make sense of that question, because
That's interesting.
I think that Wittgenstein was not sure. He was not sure either way. He was not convinced one way or the other about that.
Yeah.
And this goes back to a lot of him just thinking that most language users misuse language and misunderstand language.
Can I throw this out there? What if what Wittgenstein was getting at was ultimately sort of a... So, in the context of this conversation, we've been talking about these different nihilisms and a sort of a liminal realm. Like, you enter this nihilism, but it's then a gateway to something else.
Yeah.
You call that nihilism C and whatever else.
Yeah.
What if Wittgenstein was getting at basically analytic philosophy is becoming a liminal realm towards what you're talking about, this kind of actualization of the human potential, or however you want to put it, is like the you're trying to get to this higher place, you're trying to get this higher understanding, higher consciousness, as the spiritual person would put it, and Wittgenstein was curious, like, can philosophy get us there? And maybe where he ended up was like in this liminal realm between, like, you've got to,
you have to learn how to. I mean, one way to put it, you have a set of tools in front of you on the workbench. Okay, each tool has a function that we all commonly associate with it. Pliers, ply. Screwdrivers, drive screws. And I think Wittgenstein was asking, these tools.
Hammers, ham.
They ham. That's a good one. I think he was asking, can I be creative with these tools in a way that I can use these, maybe in an unorthodox way, to get me where I want to go?
Yeah.
I think, I a couple times before, from what you've been saying, it popped up, and I guess I've never really thought of this before, but I'm going to try. So William James has this great lecture, Will to Believe.
Yeah.
And that's in a lot of ways, that's a big epistemology people still like. That's there are things there.
Yeah. Huge things there.
Yeah. And I think there might be one reading that is maybe what you kind of are playing with, where one reading of that is that the conclusion is we have a set of logical tools, but sometimes we have to forego them, and we have to end up believing things for other reasons, right?
That's not how I would put it, but yeah, sure.
More or less, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that is kind of like the Kierkegaardian, whatever, right? I mean, but like...
I mean, I think the commonality is that at a certain point, the tools of logic come to an end, and then you have to rely on other means.
Okay, yeah.
Let's put it that way.
But I think that, again, like I said, I haven't really thought of this before, but I think that there's another reading to that, which is deciding to make that jump. Deciding to make that final move.
Yeah.
Itself.
Yeah.
Is using the tools.
But here... Okay. Here's where things...
It's like this is a gross analogy, but like you're doing a craft, you're doing Boy Scout crafts or something, whatever, I don't know. And you have the set of tools in your tool bench, and you've already used the hammer in one hand and it does a hamming thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, I actually, at first you think, these tools are not sufficient because I need another thing to hammer. you know, and you're like, okay, so that's one conclusion. Be like, nah, these tools don't work because I need another hammer. But then you come around and realize that you could take the screwdriver, flip it around, and use that as a hammer.
Yeah. Well, that's actually what I was going to say earlier, was that it's like, at a certain point, what if you're in this basement context and you have these tools and you're trying to build something but it's not working, and so eventually you realize that you can use the tools themselves as the materials for what you're building.
Yeah,
right?
okay, fuck yeah. Yeah, that's cool stuff.
Yeah,
too.
and then it's like, then it becomes,
Yeah.
So I'm running low on scotch. I want to make an important statement or thought. So I want to.
You should have chocolate.
By the way, I put this out for you. I don't know if you noticed it, but this is.
Oh, you know, I did. I actually was going to make a comment.
This is T.S. Eliot.
Yeah. Oh, what a great.
What a nice volume, isn't it?
Oh, wow.
Hardcover.
It's foxed too. You know. But that's upside down. Oh man.
Yeah, because I started to kind of organize my little canon over here.
Have you read this?
I have not.
Brendan.
Not from cover to cover.
Brendan, you gotta do yourself.
Yeah.
Gotta do yourself right, son.
Tractatus.
Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. You know, one of the most beautiful things is the numbering system here.
I know, you told me about this and I love it.
Right? Yeah. And, you know, I mean, this is 188 pages of 1 through 6.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you know, like, you know, there's like, this is, you know, there's 6.121, 6.122, you know, like, I mean, whatever, right? So, and I can't do this justice, but the P's and Cantos, right, Ezra Pound, mass, untrammeled chaos.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, you know, there's this point where, and this, Lagenbach was a wonderful professor, and he was able to make this meaningful. But,
don't you love that?
There's, But there's this wonderful, wonderful moment where there's one of the most chaotic moments, and then you flip the page, and the next entire part is just music notes. And it's this sonorous melody.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it. That is the poem, right? This ends the same way, right? You have, especially in this penultimate section 6, there's like it's crazy. You know, there's a lot of shit being thrown around. And throughout the entire book, there's no mention of normative claims, no mention of art or ethics or morals or what you should do or anything like that. And then he ends. It's 6.54, so we're in the middle of 6 still, right? And then all of a sudden, 7. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must remain silent. It's beautiful.
You know the story of
it's beautiful.
Of Thomas Aquinas.
I mean, I know the man.
So Thomas Aquinas was writing the Summa Theologica, right? And
he was French. He was at Paris.
I think today we would call him French. We wouldn't think of him that way in the sense of that, you know, everyone was writing in Latin back then, so...
But like, he was in France.
Okay, so Brother Thomas was writing the Summa Theologica. And of course now, today, it stands as the cornerstone of Catholic doctrine of like, this is... If you have a question about Catholic doctrine, it's... Go look at Thomas Aquinas.
The Catechism.
He is the doctor of the church, and you know, he basically wrote the equivalent. Granted, it was much longer for the Catholic tradition of like presenting in most rational, logical, discursive terms all of these questions about faith of like, you know, how many angels are there, and like, you know, where did the earth come from, you know, and not just that, but like, you know, some like serious philosophical, like, you know, what does it mean to be, and like, you know,
a lot of shit's pretty fucked up though, man.
Well, I'm not gonna say like, we can just go to the, you know, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that like, in, you know, his time, this was the Summa. It was the highest you could get to beginning to answer these questions, and so he'd spent years on this project of basically trying to do this, and and in some ways you could say he'd just started. Of course, he'd already spent years doing it. He was already getting on in his years, and but he was probably, maybe from his perspective, maybe about 2/3 done, and then he just stopped writing. And everyone was worried about him. They're like, Brother Thomas, why did you stop? You used to come every day into this scriptorium and blah blah blah. And he wouldn't answer. And so
little did they know he had Alzheimer's.
They got really really worried about him. They kept asking him, and he just wouldn't answer and wouldn't explain. And so finally. I forget what finally kind of compelled him to sort of speak to the issue, but he basically said that he'd seen something that made him realize that everything that he was writing was completely worthless.
Seen.
Yeah.
Seen.
Yeah. He'd had an experience that was a visionary experience, and that it was just everything that he'd done was completely, unsatisfactory.
So what happens now?
Well,
that was it. Did he die?
Well, a couple months later, he wound up getting some illness and passed away. But
okay. That doesn't sound good though. So what's?
Oh no, it's good.
What's okay?
I mean, the moral of the story, if you want to think about it that way, is like... No, we can't really talk about this.